It was late May 1940, and the sun had begun its slow descent behind the low rolling hills of northern France. The sky, once a pale, innocent blue, now carried streaks of gray and crimson, as if the heavens themselves were foretelling the coming storm of metal, fire, and blood. A chill wind swept across the fields, carrying with it the sharp, almost metallic scent of fear, dust, and distant gunpowder. In the tiny village of Lepinette, the streets were deserted, doors shuttered, and windows darkened. The village, like so many across Europe, had become a reluctant witness to the inexorable advance of the German army. The quiet pastoral charm of the place was now a fragile mask stretched over the tension, a thin veneer hiding the terrible anticipation of violence that pressed in from all sides. Every rustle of leaves, every distant clatter, every echo of footfall sent shivers through those who remained, and in the midst of it all, in a small granary loft above the cobblestone square, a figure crouched, seemingly incongruous with the modern world around him. John Malcolm Churchill, known to many simply as Mad Jack, sat motionless, his eyes scanning the dusky courtyard below. Unlike the other officers, who had abandoned hope or relied on the standard rifles, pistols, and machine guns that had become synonymous with 20th century warfare, Jack's weapons of choice were of a more ancient pedigree. In his hands rested a longbow, polished and taut, the sinew of its string humming with latent energy. At his side, a broadsword gleamed faintly in the fading light, its edge sharpened and ready for blood. In a world dominated by the cold efficiency of firearms, tanks, and mechanized infantry, Jack's choice of weaponry was not merely eccentric. It was almost theatrical, an anachronism that made even his comrades raise an eyebrow. Some whispered behind his back, calling him mad, calling him reckless, calling him medieval in a time when the modern world demanded rifles and grenades. But Jack paid them no mind, his calm gaze fixed on the cobblestones below. He had been here before, on this battlefield of anticipation and fear, and he knew that patience, precision, and the element of surprise could turn the tide in the most improbable way. From the loft, he could see the German patrols moving cautiously through the village streets, their boots echoing against the walls of shuttered houses. Each step they took seemed deliberate, mechanical, confident yet unaware, as though the weight of their own armor and the certainty of their mission had blinded them to the possibility of unseen resistance. Jack's heart did not race. He felt no panic. Instead, a singular focus took hold of him, a clarity that comes only in moments where life and death hang by a single thread. He knocked an arrow with the grace of a seasoned archer, drawing the string back until the wooden shaft was nearly quivering with energy. Every muscle in his body tensed, yet his movements were fluid, almost serene. He could feel the rhythm of the approaching soldiers, the cadence of their steps, the soft murmurs of command. The entire battlefield seemed suspended, the air itself holding its breath as he prepared to act. We truly appreciate your support, so don't forget to like the video, follow the channel, and hit subscribe. Your encouragement keeps us bringing you more amazing war stories. The soldiers below, oblivious to the lethal gaze above, continued their march. One sergeant paused to examine a crumbling wall, the light of his flashlight catching on the barrel of a rifle, the brass buttons on his uniform glinting in the dying sun. Jack's eyes narrowed, his aim precise, and he released. The arrow flew silently, a streak of darkness against the pale sky, and struck true. The sergeant stumbled, a look of disbelief crossing his face before he crumpled onto the cobblestones, blood blossoming like dark ink across the faded gray of the square. The German troops froze, confusion rippling through their ranks. They could not comprehend what had just happened. The notion that a single man, armed with an instrument from centuries past, could strike with such deadly accuracy seemed impossible. But there lay the first casualty of Jack's unorthodox assault, and the shock waves of his action spread quickly through the village, though the others would not yet understand the full measure of the danger that had descended upon them. As chaos began to ripple outward, Jack did not pause. He leapt from his perch in the loft, landing with the grace of a man who had trained his entire life for such moments. His broadsword flashed in the waning light, and the first of the German soldiers looked up just in time to see the edge of history swing toward them. His men, those brave souls who had chosen to follow him despite the mockery and doubt, surged forward, rifles in hand, moving with precision born of trust in a leader who thrived in unpredictability. The Germans, caught between the sudden appearance of armed resistance and the fear of the unknown, faltered. Orders were shouted, confused, misheard. Some soldiers tried to return fire, but the surprise and audacity of the attack had unsettled them. Jack moved like a shadow among shadows, his sword cutting, his voice commanding, his presence a catalyst that turned hesitation into surrender, confusion into chaos. The smell of gunpowder mingled with the metallic tang of blood, and the air seemed thick with the tension of life and death. Yet amidst this turmoil, Jack remained almost otherworldly, a figure transported from the annals of medieval legend into the modern battlefield. He was not merely fighting, he was performing. Each movement a statement of defiance, a reminder that courage and skill could transcend the tools of war, that audacity itself could become a weapon as lethal as any rifle or machine gun. The German soldiers, trained to respect the technological superiority of their army, now faced a force they could not rationalize, an individual whose actions defied all expectation and logic. Even as he engaged, Jack's mind remained clear. Every strike of the sword, every command issued to his men was measured, precise. There was no room for hesitation. There was no margin for error. The village, silent only moments before, now resonated with the tumult of battle. But Jack's presence dominated it, bending time and space into a rhythm he could control. The arrow had been his opening gambit, the sword his assertion of dominance, and now his leadership ensured that the engagement would not collapse into disorganized chaos. Each German soldier who faltered or attempted resistance became a step toward the inevitable outcome Jack had already envisioned. The first wave of enemy troops surrendered under the weight of impossibility. Some raised their hands in disbelief, others in fear, and a few stared blankly at the man who had in a few moments dismantled their confidence, shattered their order, and claimed victory with methods no one could have predicted. Jack did not pause to revel in the moment. There was still movement in the shadows, still the possibility of counterattack. His awareness extended beyond sight, beyond sound. He felt the rhythm of the battlefield, anticipating the next step, ready to counter, ready to strike again if necessary. Each breath, each heartbeat, each swing of the sword was part of a larger choreography, a deadly dance that left onlookers both horrified and awed. From the loft, the village below, and the surrounding fields, the scene unfolded like a surreal tableau of war. The juxtaposition of ancient weaponry and modern conflict, of calm precision against chaotic frenzy, created an image that would be remembered and retold in whispered tones among soldiers for decades to come. Jack Churchill, armed with his longbow and broadsword, had taken the first step toward becoming legend. The air, still thick with the scent of gunpowder and sweat, seemed to hold its breath once more as the last of the German patrol was rounded up, their morale shattered, their sense of reality bent by the audacity of a single man who refused to conform to the conventions of modern warfare. Though dusk had fallen and the village lay bathed in the cold light of approaching night, the story was far from over. Jack remained vigilant, scanning for threats, guiding his men, ready to strike again if necessary. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every sound could herald danger, but he faced it all with the composure of one who had long accepted the chaotic theater of war as both challenge and stage. And in that quiet, tense interlude between action and anticipation, one truth became clear. Here was a man who would fight by his own rules, a man whose courage, skill, and audacity would become a tale that transcended time. A story that would capture the imagination of anyone who heard it, a story that began with a single arrow shot in the fading light of Lipinet. John Malcolm Churchill, known to almost everyone as Jack, or to a few in awe as Mad Jack, was not the kind of man one could easily categorize. Born in 1906, he entered the world in an era that valued decorum, duty, and measured lives. But even as a boy, he seemed to reject ordinary expectations. He had an energy that was both restless and precise, a mind that demanded challenge, and a body that craved mastery. While other children played games of imagination, Jack was drawn to activities that required skill, focus, and courage. He developed a fascination with history, particularly the stories of ancient warriors, knights, and archers who had carried swords and longbows into battle centuries before. For him, these were not dusty tales in books. They were blueprints for how a human being could confront danger with both audacity and honor. By his teenage years, Jack had honed skills that were unusual, even among the most athletic boys. He became a skilled archer, practicing for hours on end in fields and meadows, learning to shoot with precision and patience. He could stand, still as a statue, and let an arrow fly over long distances, hitting targets that seemed impossible to strike. His movements were disciplined, almost ceremonial, yet imbued with raw power. At the same time, he trained with a Scottish broadsword, or claymore, mastering swings, parries, and stances that had been developed hundreds of years before in wars fought by men of iron and courage. He moved with a blend of grace and ferocity, a rare combination that seemed both ancient and modern. Many who observed him could not help but feel that there was something extraordinary in his presence, a sense that Jack walked in two worlds at once, the present and a world of chivalric tradition that most had long left behind. Beyond physical skill, Jack also possessed an unconventional sense of purpose. While other boys focused on school, society, or a conventional career, he immersed himself in pursuits that challenged the body, mind, and spirit. He learned to play the bagpipes, an instrument that requires both strength and breath control, and he became competent enough to perform music that could stir both pride and fear in those who heard it. The bagpipes were not simply a hobby, they were part of a philosophy of life, a way of asserting presence, command, and identity. It was this combination of archery, swordsmanship, and musical performance that set him apart, giving him a multifaceted identity that could later be wielded in the theater of war as a weapon in itself. By 1939, Jack had become a figure of note in the world of competitive archery. He represented Britain at the World Archery Championships in Oslo, a testament to his dedication and precision. Unlike many who might pursue accolades for fame or recognition, Jack seemed driven by a deeper need to test himself, to measure his own limits, and to maintain the skills that he believed might one day serve a higher purpose. In his mind, there was no contradiction between sport and war, between discipline and daring. Every arrow he released, every swing of his sword, every note from his bagpipes, prepared him for the possibility of combat, where courage, skill, and imagination were the only things that truly mattered. When the storm of World War II swept across Europe, Jack did not hesitate. Many men of his age found themselves reluctant or hesitant, uncertain of how to contribute in a conflict that seemed both terrifying and incomprehensible. But for Jack, the war was a stage on which he could put into action the lessons he had cultivated for decades. He joined the British Army, not as a desk officer or a bureaucrat, but in positions that allowed him to fight, to lead, and to challenge both himself and the enemy. His choice of arms, however, remained true to his philosophy. While others carried rifles, submachine guns, and pistols, Jack continued to carry the sword he had trained with for years, and, when circumstances allowed, he kept his longbow close. He believed deeply that an officer who abandoned the weapons of personal skill and honor was improperly equipped, and he carried this conviction into battle with an unshakable calm. Jack's approach to war was a mixture of strategy, audacity, and personal philosophy. He understood the value of modern warfare, the necessity of discipline and coordination, yet he also recognized that fear and unpredictability could be turned against the enemy as effectively as bullets or grenades. His methods were unconventional and at times seemed reckless, but they were rooted in an acute understanding of human psychology, battlefield dynamics, and timing. He knew how to exploit hesitation, confusion, and surprise. To Jack, war was not only a contest of force, but also a test of imagination, a space where audacity could equal advantage, and where courage could tip the balance even when the odds seemed insurmountable. In early 1940, when Jack was stationed with the British Expeditionary Force in France, the German army was advancing with overwhelming speed and organization. The mechanized assault, supported by tanks, artillery, and highly trained infantry, threatened to overrun everything in its path. Retreats and evacuations became routine, and fear spread among soldiers who faced a force they could scarcely resist. Yet in the midst of this chaos, Jack's demeanor remained remarkable. Unlike many officers who worried about orders, logistics, or their own safety, he focused on what he could control: his skill, his timing, and the courage of those who followed him. He carried himself with an almost theatrical calm, but beneath that calm was a mind constantly calculating, observing, and planning, a mind that saw opportunity where others saw only danger. Jack's personal philosophy extended beyond weapons or tactics. It was a code of conduct that emphasized courage, individuality, and the refusal to conform blindly to expectations. He believed that bravery was not simply a matter of following orders or relying on technology, but a measure of the human spirit. He encouraged those under his command to think, to act decisively, and to embrace the unexpected. This was not always easy for soldiers accustomed to conventional approaches, yet many found themselves inspired by his energy and conviction. They followed him not because they fully understood his methods, but because they trusted his judgment, his fearlessness, and his ability to navigate impossible situations with composure and skill. Despite his eccentricities, Jack's commitment to preparation and discipline was absolute. Every action he took, from practicing archery to maintaining his swordsmanship and physical conditioning, had a purpose. Nothing was frivolous, and every skill was maintained with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He approached training with a meticulousness that would have been admired by any modern military strategist, yet his methods also retained a touch of art, of flair, of personal expression. Even in small gestures, in the way he handled his equipment or moved through space, Jack displayed a combination of efficiency and style that was almost poetic. In many ways, Jack was a living bridge between eras. He embodied the martial ideals of knights and warriors long past, while functioning effectively in the modern battlefield. His understanding of both worlds allowed him to exploit weaknesses that others overlooked, to confront danger with creativity, and to inspire those around him. He refused to let the mechanized, impersonal nature of contemporary warfare strip him of the personal agency, skill, and audacity that defined his character. To Jack, the bow, the sword, and even the bagpipes were not mere relics. They were extensions of himself, tools through which courage, precision, and individuality could manifest. Jack's story in 1940 was not just about physical preparation or technical skill, it was about mindset. While many soldiers experienced fear, indecision, and a sense of helplessness, he seemed almost immune to hesitation. He saw danger not as an obstacle, but as a challenge, a puzzle to be solved through timing, skill, and boldness. In this way, he transformed what others considered eccentricity into an advantage, using unpredictability to unsettle the enemy and instill confidence in his own men. His presence on the battlefield was magnetic. It drew attention, inspired loyalty, and created uncertainty in those who faced him. The late spring air of May 1940 carried a strange combination of sweetness and dread across the French countryside, a deceptive calm that seemed to mock the horrors waiting just beyond the horizon. In the small village of L'Épinette, the sun had dipped low behind distant hills, painting the sky with shades of blood red and purple, and the shadows lengthened like silent sentinels over cobblestone streets and shuttered houses. The villagers had long fled, leaving the buildings hollow and silent, leaving only the echo of fear in the empty lanes. Somewhere in the center of this fragile village, hidden within the wooden loft of an abandoned granary, a figure crouched motionless, waiting, listening, calculating. John Malcolm Churchill, known as Mad Jack, gripped the longbow in his hands, feeling the taut string and the smooth wood beneath his fingers. Unlike any other soldier in the British Expeditionary Force, he relied not on a rifle or a machine gun, but on a weapon that had been in use centuries before the age of bullets, a weapon that demanded patience, precision, and courage. Around him, the stillness seemed almost sacred, broken only by the distant measured cadence of German boots approaching across the cobblestones. The patrol was cautious, confident, yet oblivious. Their minds were trained to expect resistance from conventional forces rifles, and grenades. But the possibility that a single man could defy the rules of modern combat had not occurred to them. Jack's eyes scanned each soldier, noting the angle of their heads, the way they shifted their weight, the subtle signals that betrayed nervousness or overconfidence. Time seemed to stretch. Every heartbeat was magnified, every inhalation and exhalation loud in the quiet loft. He nocked an arrow, the feathers brushing against his cheek, and pulled the string taut. The arrow hummed with tension, as if vibrating with anticipation of its flight. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled, his focus absolute. The moment demanded perfect precision, for one mistake could betray his position, invite death, and destroy the opportunity to strike. Below him, the German sergeant moved ahead of his patrol, inspecting the edges of a wall, the first rays of fading light reflecting off the buttons of his uniform. Jack had studied the movements of soldiers for years, understanding the rhythm and the patterns that gave life to the chaos of war. Every step, every glance, every small hesitation told a story. He aligned the arrow with his target, drawing the string back further, feeling the sinew flex against his fingers. The world seemed to narrow, the noise of the approaching patrol fading into the distance, replaced by a heightened awareness, a tunnel of focus that left nothing but the target and his intent. In that moment, time seemed to hold its breath. The release was instantaneous, smooth and silent. The arrow flew with deadly accuracy, slicing through the dimming air, a shadow streaking across the cobblestones. The sergeant barely had time to react, a flicker of realization crossing his face before he crumpled to the ground, blood darkening the stone beneath him. The German patrol froze, uncertainty rippling through the group like a wave. Their confidence, built on discipline and training, faltered in the face of the impossible. A single silent arrow had struck without warning, and the presence of the shooter was unknown, intangible, and terrifying. Jack did not pause to savor the moment. Every second was an opportunity, and hesitation now could undo everything. He vaulted from the loft with the agility of a man half his age, landing lightly on the ground, his broadsword glinting in the dying light. The Germans now saw him, a figure moving with calm yet lethal intent, sword in hand, arrows still in quiver, his eyes blazing with unyielding determination. Chaos erupted. Rifle fire cracked, the echo bouncing off the walls, and the first of the patrol's men scrambled for cover. Jack moved like a force of nature, weaving through the courtyard, striking with precision, and directing his own men to positions of advantage. The Germans were caught between disbelief and reaction. The psychological shock of being targeted by someone so unorthodox made them falter, miss their shots, and surrender to instinct rather than strategy. Jack's presence was almost cinematic in its intensity. He combined the movements of centuries-old swordsmanship with the fluidity and timing of modern combat. Each swing of his sword, each command shouted to his men, created a rhythm, a choreography of violence that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. He understood the importance of momentum, of surprise, of fear as a weapon. The German soldiers, trained to expect conventional warfare, now faced something entirely unexpected, a human element they could not calculate, predict, or counter with their standard drills. They hesitated, giving Jack the advantage, allowing him to dictate the terms of the engagement. The engagement continued with a terrifying intensity. Grenades exploded, smoke curled through the streets, and the sounds of battle, shouting, metal clashing, boots running, filled the night. Yet through the chaos, Jack remained a calm eye, observing, calculating, and executing with precision. He moved from shadow to shadow, his sword swinging, his voice carrying clear commands to his men. His strategy relied on disrupting the enemy's sense of order, turning their confidence into confusion and their hesitation into opportunity. Each German soldier who faltered, who tried to retreat, or who attempted resistance, became part of a larger pattern that Jack was orchestrating with both skill and instinct. It is said that his arrow kill at Lepinette is the last documented use of a longbow in modern warfare, a weapon that had not seen action in centuries except for ceremonial or sport purposes. The symbolism of that moment is staggering. Here was a man standing against the modern machinery of war with a tool from the past, a weapon that demanded mastery and achieving lethal success. Some historians question the accuracy of the account, arguing that the bow may have been destroyed earlier, or that the kill might have been made with a rifle. Yet even in the smallest possibility, the event cemented Jack's reputation as someone who approached combat differently, whose audacity was itself a weapon, and whose presence could alter the course of engagements. The German patrol, now partially in retreat, partially in shock, struggled to regroup. Jack's men, inspired by his fearlessness and confidence, pressed forward. They executed movements they would never have attempted under ordinary leadership, striking with precision, moving with coordination, and overwhelming the enemy with speed and psychological impact rather than raw numbers alone. The sergeant who had fallen to the arrow became a symbol, a turning point that made clear to both sides the extraordinary nature of the encounter. Jack's strategy blended intimidation, surprise, skill, and morale, creating a scenario in which the enemy could not recover. Even in the aftermath of the engagement, the tension did not dissipate. Jack remained vigilant, scanning rooftops, alleys, and shadowed corners for potential threats. He understood that victory could be fleeting, that enemy reinforcements could arrive at any moment, and that the chaos of battle required constant awareness. His training, his philosophy, and his instinct combined to give him an almost preternatural sense of the battlefield. Every movement of his men, every sound, every shadow, every fleeting moment of hesitation or fear was processed, weighed, and acted upon. In this way, Jack's battlefield was not merely physical, it was psychological, a complex web of perception, action, and reaction, all of which he could manipulate with skill and daring. The aftermath of the arrow kill and ensuing skirmish became the seed of legend. Jack's courage and unorthodox methods were whispered among soldiers, recounted in hushed tones in camps, and passed along in letters and memoirs. Even those who doubted the specifics of the longbow attack acknowledged the aura of audacity and skill that surrounded him. The image of a lone man, armed with ancient weapons, striking fear into trained modern soldiers, captured imaginations, and his story would be retold for generations, blending fact, exaggeration, and the mythic quality of human daring. Yet beyond legend, there was also the raw, visceral reality of the event. The smell of gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood, the echoes of shouted commands, and the physical exertion required to leap, strike, and coordinate action under fire were all real. Jack's success was not a product of fantasy. It was a combination of preparation, skill, audacity, and an understanding of human psychology. He transformed fear into opportunity, and his unorthodox approach to warfare challenged assumptions about what was possible on the battlefield. The arrow that had flown in that May evening was both literal and symbolic, a single, precise, decisive action that encapsulated Jack's philosophy of war, courage, and individuality. Even today, historians debate the exact details. Some argue that only one arrow was fired, others that the bow may have been a secondary weapon to create psychological effect. Some records claim the longbow had been destroyed earlier, while anecdotal accounts describe the extraordinary calm with which Jack executed his attack. Regardless of which version is accurate, the essence remains. Jack Churchill had faced a group of highly trained soldiers, relied on skill, precision, and courage rather than convention, and emerged victorious, leaving a mark on history that would outlive him. From the shadows of Lepinette, Jack's figure became a legend. His actions demonstrated that innovation could be unconventional, that courage could defy expectation, and that even in the most modern of wars, the human element, bravery, skill, audacity, could rewrite the rules of engagement. The arrow that flew through that spring air was not merely a weapon, it was a statement, a declaration that Jack would fight by his own rules, blending past and present, tradition and instinct, audacity and strategy, creating a moment that would echo far beyond the village streets and into the annals of military lore. After the legendary encounter at Lepinette, John Malcolm Churchill's reputation as a soldier who defied convention grew rapidly. But that single arrow and sword strike was only the beginning of a series of exploits that would cement his place in history as one of the most audacious and unconventional warriors of World War II. Unlike most soldiers who relied entirely on modern weaponry and calculated strategy, Jack's approach to war was theatrical yet lethal, combining skills from centuries past with an uncanny understanding of modern combat tactics. He had learned that war was as much a psychological game as a physical one, and he used surprise, unpredictability, and sheer bravado as instruments to destabilize enemies and inspire his own men. His reputation for eccentricity became one of his most powerful weapons. For an opponent who hesitated, who doubted, or who feared the unknown, could be as easily defeated as by a hail of bullets. Following the retreat from France and the evacuation at Dunkirk, Jack volunteered for the newly formed British Commandos, an elite unit tasked with conducting raids, sabotage, and reconnaissance behind enemy lines. The commandos were trained to strike with precision and speed, and Jack's abilities made him a natural leader within their ranks. He stood out not just for his skill, but for his audacity. Where other soldiers might hesitate in the face of danger, Jack thrived, relishing the challenge of the impossible. He carried with him his broadsword, always polished and ready, and often his longbow, which he used when stealth and silence were necessary, though it was sometimes damaged or impractical in the chaos of a raid. He also carried his bagpipes, an instrument that, for most, seemed entirely unsuitable for combat. Yet for Jack, it was both a symbol and a tool. The wail of the bagpipes, echoing across a battlefield, could instill terror in enemies and exhilarate allies, turning fear into confusion and chaos into advantage. One of the most famous episodes of Jack's commando career occurred in Norway during a raid known as Operation Archery in 1941. The mission aimed to strike at German garrisons along the coast, destroy supply depots, and gather intelligence. As the landing craft approached the shore, the soldiers prepared to disembark, rifles and grenades at the ready, hearts pounding in anticipation of the inevitable clash. And then Jack leapt forward, bagpipes in hand, and began to play a stirring, haunting Scottish tune. The sound pierced the cold air, reverberating over rocks, water, and enemy positions. The Germans, hearing the eerie music of a warrior whose presence seemed larger than life, were momentarily disoriented, unsure whether to perceive it as a psychological trick, a signal, or madness. At that moment, Jack led his men onto the beach, charging with sword and rifle, exploiting the confusion his bagpipes had created. The raid was executed with astonishing efficiency. The garrison overwhelmed in minutes, supplies destroyed, and intelligence gathered, all while the music of centuries past mingled with the chaos of modern warfare. His courage was coupled with an unwavering commitment to his personal code. Jack believed that every soldier, every officer, had a duty not only to fight, but to maintain honor, to take risks thoughtfully, and to act decisively. He rejected the notion that modern warfare required conformity, and he demonstrated repeatedly that innovation, audacity, and skill could be just as lethal as machinery, bullets, and artillery. The broadsword he carried was a symbol of this philosophy, a tangible representation of bravery and individual agency amidst the overwhelming machinery of war. The bow and the bagpipes, though less conventional, were extensions of the same principle. Mastery, courage, and daring, applied with precision and imagination. Throughout the war, Jack's reputation grew not only because of the physical feats he accomplished, but also because of the psychological effect he had on everyone around him. Allies saw in him a living demonstration of fearlessness, creativity, and leadership, while enemies perceived him as a figure almost larger than life, capable of acts that defied expectation and reason. His presence on a battlefield introduced an element of chaos for the opponent, and that chaos was carefully calculated, a controlled uncertainty that tilted outcomes in his favor. Even when wounded or captured, his audacity never waned. In prisoner of war camps, he was said to maintain his morale and spirit in ways that unsettled guards, orchestrated escapes, and continued to influence the environment around him, demonstrating that his ingenuity and courage were not confined to the battlefield alone. Jack's exploits remind us that war is not solely a contest of technology, numbers, or brute force. His life and career demonstrate that courage, skill, unpredictability, and psychological insight can be as decisive as any artillery or rifle. The raids, ambushes, and daring maneuvers he conducted throughout Norway, France, and other theaters of World War II illustrate the extraordinary impact of an individual who rejects convention, embraces audacity, and executes with precision. Jack's actions became legendary, not merely because they were unusual, but because they combined the timeless qualities of skill, bravery, and intelligence with an almost theatrical flair that amplified their effect on both allies and enemies. Even today, his exploits continue to inspire, illustrating the power of imagination and audacity in the face of overwhelming odds. The combination of sword, bow, and bagpipes became a symbol of his philosophy, that a single human being, armed with courage, skill, and creativity, could confront even the most modern and technologically advanced forces and shape the outcome of engagements in ways that few would dare to imagine. Jack Churchill's actions during World War II serve as a testament to the idea that heroism is not solely about following orders or relying on machinery, but about daring, ingenuity, and the willingness to confront the impossible head-on. The legend of John Malcolm Churchill, known as Mad Jack, did not end with the conclusion of battles or the retreat of armies. In fact, it seemed only to grow with the passage of time. Stories of his audacity, eccentricity, and seemingly impossible feats spread not only among the soldiers who witnessed him firsthand, but also across enemy lines, whispered in camps, offices, and homes where fear, disbelief, and fascination mingled in equal measure. Yet as extraordinary as these stories were, they also blurred the line between myth and reality, leaving historians, soldiers, and civilians alike to wonder which events were factual, which were exaggerated, and which belonged entirely to legend. This tension between truth and storytelling became a defining aspect of Jack's legacy, for he was a man whose life was larger than the sum of verifiable events and whose courage, skill, and audacity could inspire imagination as much as admiration. The debate over the details of his exploits often begins with the famous arrow shot at Lepinette. Some accounts insist that it was the last confirmed longbow kill in modern warfare, a symbolic and literal mark of Jack's defiance of convention, precision, and bravery. Others suggest that the bow may have been destroyed earlier, that the shot may have been fired from a rifle, or that the story had been embellished over time by those eager to immortalize a soldier whose actions seemed almost superhuman. Regardless of which version is accurate, the essence of the story is consistent. Jack stood alone or nearly alone against trained modern troops, wielding skills and weapons that defied expectation, and his presence altered the course of engagements in ways that defied reason and convention. The debate over the exact facts does little to diminish the psychological impact of the tale. For both allies and enemies, Jack represented the unpredictable, the courageous, and the audacious. And those qualities resonate beyond the confines of historical verification. Jack's legend continued to grow as he carried out commando raids across Norway, France, and other theaters of the war. Accounts describe him leaping onto beaches while playing the bagpipes, charging into enemy positions with broadsword in hand, capturing dozens of prisoners with nothing more than audacity and his skill, and surviving situations that would have been fatal to most. Some of these accounts are supported by military records and eyewitness testimonies, while others exist more in the realm of folklore, passed down orally, amplified by the human tendency to embellish and glorify extraordinary courage. What is indisputable is the effect these stories had on those who heard them. For British soldiers, Jack became a symbol of fearlessness and ingenuity, a figure whose presence inspired confidence and daring. For German soldiers, he was a ghost, an almost mythical warrior who struck when least expected, wielded weapons from another era, and operated beyond the constraints of conventional warfare. Even in situations where the precise details may never be known, his influence as a figure of psychological warfare cannot be overstated. The tension between myth and fact extended to claims that Jack killed 7 German sergeants in 3 days, a feat often repeated in modern retellings, but not verifiable in historical records. Some historians suggest that this number was likely exaggerated, a product of the oral tradition and the human desire to create heroes in times of crisis. Others argue that, whether true or not, the story reflects the essence of Jack's character. A man willing to confront danger with singular courage and to use his unique skills in ways that confounded the enemy. The line between reality and legend, in this case, is almost irrelevant because the perception of Jack's audacity had a tangible effect on both sides of the conflict. His reputation alone, amplified by the stories of daring raids and improbable victories, became a force to be reckoned with, shaping behavior, decision-making, and morale in ways that formal military strategy could not. Jack's approach to combat, which combined modern tactics with ancient weaponry and unorthodox methods, challenged assumptions about the nature of warfare. In an era dominated by mechanized armies, artillery, and automatic weapons, he demonstrated that individual skill, courage, and ingenuity could still change outcomes, inspire troops, and unsettle enemies. The broadsword he carried, the bagpipes he played, and the longbow he sometimes used were more than tools. They were statements, extensions of a philosophy that emphasized personal mastery, audacity, and psychological influence. By integrating these elements into his actions, Jack transformed the battlefield into a stage where both reality and perception were instruments of power. His story reminds us that war is not merely a contest of technology or numbers, but a complex interplay of skill, psychology, and imagination. Even after the war, Jack's life continued to blur the boundaries between legend and fact. He remained a figure of fascination, regaling friends, family, and journalists with stories of his exploits, some confirmed, others enhanced by his own flair for drama. He joked about the absurdity of his fame, about the inevitability of tales growing taller with each retelling, yet there was no denying the kernel of truth that underpinned every story. He had been fearless, inventive, and unusually effective in combat. His personal charm, courage, and eccentricity ensured that his legend endured not merely as a collection of historical events, but as a narrative that captivated the imagination, illustrating the timeless appeal of audacity, skill, and defiance of convention. Jack's legacy is also a testament to the power of individuality within a structured, hierarchical system like the military. While many officers adhered strictly to protocol and conventional methods, Jack demonstrated that innovation, personal skill, and boldness could coexist with discipline and leadership. His methods were sometimes unconventional, often theatrical, yet they were effective, producing results that exceeded expectation and inspiring those under his command. Soldiers who served with him reported that they would follow him into any situation, drawn not only by loyalty but by the excitement and clarity of purpose he instilled. The human element, the courage to act decisively, the willingness to embrace risk, and the ability to think creatively under pressure proved as critical as any technology or strategy. Across decades, the story of Mad Jack has been recounted in books, documentaries, and interviews, often highlighting both the feats he accomplished and the debates surrounding them. Scholars, historians, and enthusiasts continue to examine the balance between myth and reality. Yet there is a consensus that, whether every detail is factual or embellished, Jack's courage and ingenuity were real, impactful, and extraordinary. His life demonstrates the enduring appeal of the figure who defies expectation, challenges norms, and operates at the intersection of bravery, skill, and imagination. Even those skeptical of specific claims acknowledge that the aura he created had real consequences on morale, perception, and outcomes during the war. The stories of Jack's exploits also emphasize the importance of narrative in human understanding of history. Wars are not fought solely through statistics, troop movements, or technological superiority. They are experienced, remembered, and transmitted through the stories of individuals who embody courage, cunning, and creativity. Jack Churchill's legend exemplifies this principle. Whether it is the arrow that supposedly struck the last German sergeant, the sword that captured dozens, or the bagpipes that heralded a commando raid, the tales endure because they speak to fundamental human qualities: bravery, ingenuity, audacity, and the refusal to conform to expectations even under extreme pressure. Ultimately, the story of Mad Jack reminds us that history is as much about perception and inspiration as it is about events and dates. He represents the capacity of a single individual to shape the narrative of war, to turn fear into advantage, and to achieve extraordinary outcomes through skill, courage, and imagination. The blending of myth and facts surrounding his exploits only enhances the fascination, creating a figure who is not only historically significant, but also symbolically powerful. In a century dominated by machines, bullets, and modern strategy, Jack demonstrated that human qualities, courage, creativity, audacity, and skill remain decisive and enduring. Today, those who hear the story of Mad Jack are captivated by the combination of reality, exaggeration, and legend. It is this mixture that keeps the tale alive, that draws people in, that makes them pause, imagine, and feel the tension, the fear, and the exhilaration of moments when one man, armed with courage, a broadsword, bagpipes, and sometimes a longbow, stood against overwhelming odds and turned the chaos of war into a stage for audacity and brilliance. The debate over exact numbers, specific kills, or the use of weapons does not diminish the fact that Jack Churchill's life exemplified a rare form of heroism, one where individuality, skill, and fearlessness could coexist with discipline, leadership, and strategic impact. His legend endures because it embodies qualities that transcend time, conflict, and circumstance, reminding us that courage and ingenuity are eternal forces that can shape both perception and reality on the battlefield. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. See you in the next video.